Aloha, it is 1:01 p.m. on Wednesday, October 23rd, 2024, and I call the Committee on Housing, Sustainability, and Health meeting to order. I'd like to welcome members who are present in the council chamber, Councilmember Dos Santos Tam, also Councilmember Okimoto, and would also like to welcome Councilmember Se as well. And I believe we have Councilmember Cordero online. Vice Chair Kia'aina is excused, and Councilmember Toba is also excused. Pursuant to Hawaii Revised Statute Section 92-3.7, this meeting will be conducted as a remote meeting by interactive conference technology with the following procedures in effect. Members of the public will be allowed to provide oral testimony remotely or in person in the council chamber on all items on the agenda when each item is taken up. All persons who register to testify in person will be called upon first, followed by those who register to testify remotely. Persons who have not registered will be given an opportunity to testify following the registered testifiers. For those standing by remotely, please utilize the Zoom raise hand feature to indicate your desire to speak. And for those joining us by telephone only, please press *9 to indicate your desire to speak. I'll identify you by the last 3 digits of your phone number, and when your number is called, press *6 to unmute yourself when prompted. Also, I'd like to welcome Councilmember Toba to the chamber. Before testifying, each person shall state their full name and will be limited to a 1-minute presentation on each item. HRS Section 92-3.7 requires all votes at a remote meeting to be conducted by a roll call unless unanimous. I will first call for objections, and if there are any, I'll call for a roll call vote. Councilmember Cordero is participating remotely by video conference. Welcome again. In accordance with HRS Section 92-3.7, Councilmember Cordero, can you please identify each person who is with you at your location?
Hi, Chair. I am alone.
Mahalo. Just note that under HRS Section 92-3.7, the meeting will automatically recess if we lose audio-visual contact with you and cannot reconvene until we reestablish contact. Therefore, as I know you already know, please announce beforehand if you will be voluntarily signing out of the meeting. Written testimonies, including the testifier's address, email address, and phone number, will be available to the public as described on the posted agenda. As a courtesy, we would ask that everyone please turn off or mute your cell phones, and that will bring us to agenda item number 1 for action. This is Bill 51, 2024, allowing for the adaptive reuse of existing commercial buildings. Members, we have a proposed CD1 to the bill that I submitted, and for your information, a summary of the amendments is posted on the agenda. I don't see DPP here, so we'll defer for now. If they show up. I know Board of Water Supply did submit testimony, and I'll go ahead and invite you up now if you wanted to share some comments on the measure or Board of Water Supply's position.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee, Councilmember Cordero. My name is Kathy Mitchell with the Board of Water Supply. We submitted written testimony on Bill 51, proposed CD1. Our testimony isn't directly addressing ventilation. It's in general adaptive reuse. And we just wanted to let developers, their property managers, agents be aware of in the planning and design phase of converting a commercial building into a residential or a mixed use to consider the water meters. If it's 100% residential, then it would be converted to a commercial meter to a residential meter. If it is a mixed use, then you'll have to have meters for both those categories.
Appreciate that insight. Any questions for Board of Water Supply? I'm seeing none. I appreciate you raising that today, and we'll also make sure that that's shared with other stakeholders we engage with as well.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, mahalo. Members, we'll go ahead and go to testimony. We'll now proceed to remote testimony. I believe we have Angela Melody Young, registered online. Ms. Young, are you ready to testify? You can go ahead and unmute and proceed.
Aloha. I'm so sorry. I didn't read the draft, so I can't testify right now. Okay. Maybe for full council.
Okay, well, mahalo for stopping by. So you're reserving comment on the bill at this time. Appreciate that. Okay, anyone else online wishing to testify can use the raise hand feature. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and go to in-person. I believe we have Michael Silva registered, and anyone else in chamber wishing to testify on this item can go ahead and make their way forward as well. But seeing none, Mr. Silva, we'll go ahead and wrap up with you. Perfect, the light came on, so.
Okay, yeah. Good. I'm Michael Silva. I'm a licensed professional mechanical engineer, licensed professional civil engineer here in the state of Hawaii. I've been part of the construction industry or related to the construction industry now for over 40 years. Time sure flies. I'm also the former division chief for Department of Planning Permitting Building Division, Chief of Building Safety. And I need to make clear that I am here testifying as an individual and not for the department. I have not been privy to any of the department's position regarding Bill 51. I acknowledge that the state does require us to provide, to allow adaptive reuse to meet the interior environment requirements of the International Building Code. I did grow up in affordable housing for the state, and so I know very well the need for affordable housing, so I do support adaptive reuse. But I oppose the current Bill 51 in its current form, as well as the proposed committee draft, because it would allow 100% mechanical ventilation with no natural ventilation, no connections to the outside directly. I would like to have the committee recall what it says at the beginning of the housing code, ROH 16A, that it exists to protect situations that threaten the health, safety, and welfare of the public by creating unsafe living conditions. And so I would think any discussions regarding revision of the housing code should keep that in mind. I need to point out, though, I did submit a written testimony, but I need to point out that I do have a typo in it. On the second page of my testimony, I believe I wrote ROH 16B housing code is actually ROH 16A housing code. Sorry, there was a little bit of a booze there. Realizing that the state requires us to provide allowances to meet the interior requirements of the International Building Code, I propose that we add a statement to the amendments being proposed to say ventilation for bedrooms shall be in accordance with the natural ventilation requirements of the International Building Code. That would meet the requirement of the state law, Act 37, as well as meet the intent of the existing housing code. If you want to, I have additional discussions on mechanical versus natural ventilation in my write-up. I would like to call specific attention, though, to item number 6, which is on the last page of my written testimony regarding power failures. I don't think it was ever brought up in any of the discussions regarding adaptive reuse that the International Building Code only allows for only requires 2 hours of standby power. So that is something that really needs to be considered should the committee and should the full council decide to move forward with Bill 51. I yield the rest of the time. You can take a look at the rest of my write-up. I would encourage you to read the report by UC Berkeley that provides a very well-balanced evaluation of adaptive reuse.
Mahalo, appreciate your testimony. I did have a few questions. I'll ask the committee too if they had any questions. Seeing none at this time. So just want to make sure I'm understanding. Appreciate your work, Mr. Silva, your advocacy. I know you came down when the prior bill came through too. And so just wanted to kind of walk through to make sure I was understanding. So what I'm hearing is that your reading of the state legislation is that the city would be able to comply with it by requiring that projects comply with the portion of the IBC that regulates natural ventilation.
Yes.
Okay. For the sake of, I guess, the committee's purpose, because this bill, would have to go through 3 readings, are there any conditions that would be appropriate to apply in situations where the legal interpretation was that the city couldn't limit or prevent projects from utilizing mechanical ventilation? Does the question make sense? Because I guess a part of the issue was, seems like the legislature was intending for us to allow for mechanical ventilation that complied with the IBC. And so just wanting to kind of get feedback on that.
Yeah, I understand that was the intent. I was tracking that bill going through the House and the Senate. I did miss a few weeks of tracking it and it became law. So I wasn't able to provide testimony in time, but I do realize that's the intent. I don't think the Senate or the House realized that there was an option to allow for natural ventilation in the way that it's stated. We here in the city can allow for natural ventilation and meet the requirement that's placed in the Act 37, because it basically says that interior environment shall meet the requirements of the International Building Code. Natural ventilation, as described in the International Building Code, is one of those things. And so there's nothing that I understand that would prohibit the city from taking that action.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. And again, I don't want to put you in a hard spot because I know your position, and I only was asking because I know some of the language in there was arrived at with assuming that the interpretation of the state law was, oh, we need to allow mechanical ventilation. And so what safeguards can we put in there? And so that's why I only wanted to also give you an opportunity to opine on that if you want to. But understand your position today 100%. So appreciate your testimony.
Thank you.
Councilmember Tolba.
Thank you, Mr. Silva. Just for my understanding, and maybe can you explain more about your concerns, with the natural ventilation and mechanical ventilation?
Well, my written testimony gives, I think, 8 or 9 different reasons for natural ventilation. I think my main concern is when the system fails or if there's a major power outage that results from an emergency event and power might be out for a few days, even a week. Emergency power is only for 2 hours. So you get 2 hours out of the whole week. If we require natural ventilation in accordance with the International Building Code for bedrooms now, because the housing code only requires it for bedrooms, we would eliminate the need to provide emergency power for natural ventilation, for fresh air ventilation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Silva. Appreciate it.
Welcome.
Well, Councilmember Dos Santos, Tam.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Silva, I appreciate your suggested amendment, which says ventilation for bedrooms shall be in accordance with the natural ventilation requirements of the International Building Code. And I'm assuming that's just for adaptive reuse projects.
Yes.
And so I wanted to ask how that is different meaningfully different than Section E4 of the bill, which says every dwelling unit must be provided with natural ventilation or mechanical ventilation in accordance with such the standards and requirements of the International Building Code.
Okay, thank you. So I did provide an excerpt of the natural ventilation section of the International Building Code that we currently follow. It does allow for other means for natural ventilation other than what's currently stated in the housing code. So that's kind of the main issue. It provides for other options for natural ventilation.
So putting all that together, it seems like your core issue is simply natural ventilation in the bedroom, and the rest of the spaces, there's no issue.
Yeah, the rest of the spaces can be 100% mechanically ventilated as allowed by the housing code.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Say.
Thank you very much, Mr. Silva. Nice to see you again.
Good to see you again.
Yeah, the question I would pose to you is, when we had the hearing on this particular measure, there was strong support for it. But with your testimony, it made us think twice about the health and safety. Would you know if this measure is enacted, how much savings could a commercial unit being reused to a residential unit save by applying this to IBC?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
The question
I didn't quite
is,
hear.
Yeah. How much would the developer save for each of the units if you were converting from the commercial building to the residential building and allowing, the IBC code to be enacted?
That I would not know. That would have to be evaluated per building. Each building is different in terms of the requirements.
Each
Yes.
unit is different, right?
Yes.
And in most cases, a lot of our commercial buildings do not have that open type of window up.
Yes.
So, the question would be, I don't know. I just didn't want to see us pass an amendment to the building code to reuse based on the premise that it affects all buildings,
Yeah.
even residential buildings, meaning homes, single-family homes. So,
Thank you. And-
please.
Sorry. Unless I'm mistaken, there's also no distinction between any type of commercial buildings in Act 37. And so we could get some warehouse where builders or developers decide to put up walls and call it a adaptive reuse. I'm not entirely clear on that, but from what I gather from Act 37, it does not make that distinction. It just says commercial buildings.
Mr. Chair, may I ask one more question?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I was very privileged, and Mr. Silva, thank you for your attendance. I did visit a building that is on the Mauka side. Is it close to Baratania Street? Is it the 4th Street Mall, the one that was retrofitted or whatever? How
Yes.
did they do that? How did that particular developer address that issue?
I believe each unit is provided with outside air ventilation.
Yeah.
I wasn't involved in the review, or I didn't take a look at the plans for that project in detail. I believe that project was also approved via third-party review.
Okay, third-party review. And if there was a major disaster and the power system all went down, like what happened in Chinatown, etc., and it's just not for 1 or 2 days, would the city be held liable for allowing it?
That's a question for the attorneys.
Loss of goods, loss of services, etc. Because I think the city and the state did try to support our community in Chinatown when we had that Hawaii Electric blowout. So in closing, not too bad, Chair Weyer, not too bad if it's 5, 10 stories, but 20, 25 stories, you got to walk down. And that's the concern. But let it be, let the buyer beware if they are going to buy or rent at that point in time. building.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Silva. We'll keep you around in case any of the committee, I'll defer to you, but in case the committee has questions as we go through the discussion, because I saw other folks came in too, feel free to stay.
Okay.
But appreciate your testimony and your position.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, committee.
Yeah, thank you. And the committee is going to continue to take input on the bill. Just wanted to kind of give some context. So Act 37 was passed originating as House Bill number 2090, right, and would require the counties to update their codes and allowance for what we could call adaptive reuse. And so the current measure, Bill 51, in order to comply with the bill's requirement that the updates occur before January 1st, 2025, or rather I'll note that according to the legislature, the language and the standards in that bill that was passed would take effect in January 2025. And so what this attempt was in Bill 51 was to provide standards that were informed by Honolulu's housing code and the requirements that we have in trying to create some safeguards in light of the state's mandate for us, right? And so just wanted to kind of provide that context. And it's an ongoing conversation in the sense that I know some folks that are attempting to do adaptive reuse aren't particularly thrilled with the language in there, and they feel like it's too restrictive. And of course, we had heard some great testimony today. Would just note that as we go through the conversation, as originally introduced, the bill was limited to those units that would qualify as adaptive reuse. So it wouldn't be opening up to new projects that are being developed. It would simply be those that fall under the category. As was mentioned, maybe we need to look at the definition of commercial and what's included. I know we're lucky to have Deputy Director Gallagher here, and I'll go ahead and invite you up and see other folks in the gallery too. So I'll defer if anyone else wants to jump in on this particular topic, but I know Deputy Director was identified. Director, feel free to jump in too, but I'll turn it over to you to, if you can, maybe provide some context and thoughts on either the bill or just how the conversation is going as of today.
Okay, thank you, Council. Deputy Brian Gallagher, Honolulu DVP. Kind of looking into this, I guess this proposed, development going forward. Overly, we're supportive. We do have concerns about maybe not every building is a great option, but that's debatable. Depending on our real concern is ventilation in the buildings, more directly towards buildings that have windows that cannot open according to housing code, and the windows need to be operable in the bedrooms because it's taking an existing building that you have people living in these they're cooking, they have different functions that they do that maybe the original commercial building.
Okay, can I stop you right there then? Because it seems like you're commenting on Bill 51.
Correct.
So maybe could I get administration's position? So you're saying you don't feel like we need to comply with House Bill 2090, or are you saying that there's a different interpretation that should be applied?
I mean, so I think the House Bill it's just taking building code, international building code directly, which does allow for 100% mechanical ventilation, which would mean just an AC system where you don't have windows that open.
Yeah, and maybe I'll further ask, is there a need for the council to act on this matter, or, I don't see Corporation Council here, but I guess I'd be asking how we intended to apply this legislative action that takes effect January 1st, 2025.
Yeah, we're just trying to get a potentially an ordinance passed to supplement kind of what we think would be a good place while that becomes in effect. So if we don't get some kind of ordinance, then we'll apply as the best we can, knowing that building code, the international building code controls.
Okay. So just to make sure I'm hearing you correctly, am I hearing you say that if the council doesn't pass an ordinance or a bill, rather, that, assuming it is either approved by mayor or whatever mechanism it gets into effect, if the council does not pass an ordinance, would DPP be applying the standards in the legislation that was passed across the street?
That's what we would be required to do.
Okay, so does DPP have an interpretation about whether Bill 51 as introduced complies with the legislative standard from across the street? Or is that still ongoing?
It could. The intention of the direction it's going is to comply with that, with adding caveats to make it, the various members, as we're trying to work this bill forward, to make it, to potentially put it into a better place. Because our concern is the buildings that have windows that can't open, and if they don't have continuous ventilation. Like an example is the Century Center last year, where they were stuck in their building for almost a month. A lot of those units had windows that could not open, and the units got really hot. And it wasn't an electrical issue; it was their chilled water line. So there's various issues with that. We know it's going to be complicated for a lot of these buildings to come up with, because a completely duplicate backup for all these systems, there's no way to prevent every potential problem that could come through. So kind of what we see kind of move, or what we prefer, is that if there is a way to provide some form of continuous ventilation, even if opening windows aren't provided, because some buildings can have that, other ones may not, if there can be some kind of backup ventilation system. Because the issue that DPP gets into is the public comes running to DPP saying, hey, we have a major problem in our building. Can you help us out? Can you get emergency permits approved? Can you do something? Because we have this major problem. So if we know we can't solve everything all the time, and it's just a building's maintenance or whatever it can be, there's a line where we can't cross. But we also want to be cognizant of what can we do to try and give people a better living condition. So if they do have some kind of backup ventilation system to provide, at least just get outside air into that building to create some turnover, it'll give them a better living condition, so they have more time to come up with a place where they could bring in a contractor to fix their issue. Whatever. It's just trying to get to that place, understanding there's constraints on everything, trying to balance it out.
Okay. Well, I don't mean to monopolize the questions. I'll go over to Councilmember Santos Tam, and then anyone else. Councilmember Okimoto.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Deputy Director, for your comments. I agree with you. The concern is the buildings where the windows can't open. That's the whole point of this bill, because we wouldn't need this bill if this wasn't the issue. And so I just want to make that clear, that this is the reason why we're here. And we had Bill 21 of last year, we had Bill 54 of last year, both of which stalled, a lot of which, and I'll say it publicly, I think because of issues that stem from DPP. And here we are, a year later, the legislature, in that meantime, passed this bill saying, counties, you have to do this. And when I introduced Bill 21 of last year, we were trying to get ahead of this. And now the legislature is just saying, do the bare minimum. And so I want to make sure that we're able to get something out by January 1st. Now, what I didn't hear in your commentary, I wasn't completely clear on what the administration's position is. Would you rather have Bill 51 passed in its current form, or just let Act 37 go into effect and just do the absolute bare minimum? I'm a little confused at that point, so if you could make it crystal clear for me, I'd really appreciate it.
Bill 50, we would like to pass a version of Bill 51. We just want to make a couple little tweaks. So in our
Do you have what those tweaks are?
It's more getting to a backup ventilation system with some way so it can continuously run in some form. It may not be an absolute duplicate AC system if we can get a fan system, which requires far less electricity, something that we can work towards in that fashion.
Are we going to be ready with that language by November 21st, which is the next time the Housing Committee meets, and the last time that we could pass out an ordinance before January 1st of 2025?
Yes.
Great. Second question, if we add bells and whistles to this bill, and some developer comes to us and says, well, Act 37 says X, Y, and Z. it must be, if we comply with the IBC, it must be approved. Who's the arbiter to say that it complies with IBC and thus should be accepted under Act 37 versus any provision that we add in via Bill 51?
If it's under, DPP will do its best for whatever's under its jurisdiction.
And I guess this gets to sort of the flip side of Speaker Say's question, which is what happens if there is that disagreement and somebody, the developer, genuinely feels that they've complied and they feel that DPP is not interpreting the law correctly and thus the city is exposed to some kind of lengthy process. I don't know if it goes to the Building Board of Appeals or some other agency, but I can foresee this becoming very complicated if we don't get something out that makes sense and is enforceable.
Yeah, that's a comment that could be applied to anything we review within DPP. I see the intricacy you're getting into, and I completely agree. It's something we'd have to discuss with our lawyers and how we apply in DPP.
And then last question, now I'll turn back the time. With regard to a number of the other things that are related to health and safety, for example, elevators. If you have a building above 6 or 7 stories, I mean, you need an elevator and people rely on the elevator. Who sets the number of elevators? And this, I'll get to the punchline in a second, but who sets the number of elevators? And then do we not require a secondary like lift system if the elevators were to go out for a week? Like, I guess the point that I'm trying to make is there will be failures. But do we let that get in the way of building buildings above 6 stories? Do we let these things get in the way of allowing adaptive reuse of existing downtown buildings to create housing for people? Like, where is that balance? I guess that's what I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, that's an argument you could apply across many things within building construction. I totally agree with your point. It's like, where do you draw the line? Is where is too much regulation? Elevators, you have a stair back up, but then with stairs, does it apply for everybody with ADA? It's that kind of line. It's like, what is actually feasible, constructible, and then you get into building costs. So I understand the sensitivity of that comment, because you're right. There's something, we got to strike a balance and what's realistic. So that's fair.
Thank you.
Councilmember Okimura.
Thank you, Chair. This question, if that's okay, I think it might actually apply better to our Director of Housing. If that's okay, Chair, if I could have Director Isari Matsubara.
Thank you.
And if my second question applies more to DPP, then we'll call Deputy Director back up if that's okay. Aloha, Director Matsubara. So I had a couple of questions, and the first was mainly dealing, and we know you've come to us, we talk about constantly the need to have affordable housing. So this, I know my colleagues, that's the reason behind this. Has the city or has the administration looked into other areas where this could take place, downtown or elsewhere on Oahu, where these types of adaptive reuse buildings could take place or we could benefit from? Have you guys identified any other areas other than the ones that we've been talking about or that we have currently under our ownership?
So thank you very much, Denise Isari Matsubara, Office of Housing. So the Office of Housing hasn't per se taken a look at any other areas, but just as a policy, we strongly support this bill and adaptive reuse as a strategy to increase our housing inventory, period, especially in a time where COVID has left many of our office buildings vacant or underutilized. So we strongly support this strategy. We want to thank Councilmember Dos Santos Tam and Chair Weyer on convening a work group to actually meet with developers to get a bill in a fashion so that it can be supported and reflective of Act 37. So there's some ongoing discussions. We strongly believe that something like this has to happen now, especially in light of the Act. And we just want to be behind it. I thought we had it resolved with this bill. So that's kind of where we're at. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I appreciate you mentioning that, due to COVID, there have been buildings that have been vacant or that we could utilize. And I know this might be a question more for DLM. I don't see our director here for that, but maybe, I know you guys work closely together. If you have any information or knowledge on the cost efficiency of this. I'm assuming that, my understanding is that the reason to do this is because it would be more cost effective. So could you explain why is it more cost effective? How is it more cost effective to do this, other than we may already have the buildings acquired in our position? What else makes it more cost effective in providing units for affordable housing?
I wish there was an easy answer. The cost, efficiency, and effectiveness really depends on each building, on the floor plates and what needs to be reconfigured in terms of plumbing and electrical. But conceptually, because the building exists, it could conceivably be less costly and less time-consuming because you're not doing new construction. But there have been cases where buildings require so much rehab that the cost is almost the same as a new construction. So it really is on a case-by-case basis, but just conceptually, it offers, a game changer to increasing our inventory.
Thank you. And really quickly, we had Deputy Director Gallagher up here, and the concerns that they had were on the ventilation and safety. How do you guys address that, or what is your take on that? I know that you said you support this, and I understand the reason why, but from the administration's standpoint, where we do have maybe different departments who see it differently, how do you plan to address the concerns that were brought up by DPP?
The Office of Housing is going to defer to DPP because they have to implement, regulate, and enforce. That is their role. As an administration, our discussion is we want to strongly support this measure and what it represents in terms of the potential for housing.
Thank you so much, Director. Thank you, Chair.
Mahalo. See no other testifiers. We'll go ahead and close testimony. Councilmember Say, did you have questions for Director Terry Matsubara?
Yeah. Denise or Brian?
I'll defer to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Deputy Director Gallagher. If the measure was to pass with the IBC, which is fine with me, can we put in the measure a disclosure form by the seller that it is not natural ventilation, so that the prospective buyers be aware of what they are acquiring? Isn't that fair?
Yeah, that is fair. And I think, we had included that in the current form. It's good for them to know, resident awareness and what may happen.
Correct. And, I don't believe that whatever happens with these type of commercial buildings, when you retrofit it or reuse it, you're not gonna save yourself money. You have a cost already set in the acquisition of the property, Mr. Chair. That's number one. And number two, the replacement, the renovations of the present infrastructure there will be very, very expensive. And that's why I think they went at this approach, that there is no need for natural ventilation, mechanical ventilation. But if that's what the will of the members want, fine with me. But just for the prospective buyers, they have to be aware. And number two, Mr. Chair, is it possible that we, because it's a state mandate, then let's say we were to object to implementing the deadline of January 1st, 2025, and they have the course of action to take? Or are they going to sue the county? How does it work? You wouldn't know. But my point is, these type of mandates put a lot of pressure on all 9 members of the city council. And we believe in more affordable units, housing units. But will this be affordable based on what the cost of the acquisition is, number one, and number two, the replacement and renovations of the present infrastructure? And that's why I'm saying to myself, this is not going to be affordable. It is all going to be market. And yes, you'll have these units, which is much better than the other units that HHFDC had to go and bail out a particular developer. That's where I'm getting more and more scared of where we are headed for, Deputy Director Gallagher. And I voiced that yesterday also. The cost of a particular housing unit, maybe residential meaning home, single-family home versus a condominium unit, is getting out of reach of our local residents. And it's no one's fault. When I saw a presentation last night with Director Benjamin from the administration.
Sullivan from CCSR?
Yes, he was there with me. Great presentation, but it's hard to believe that $1,000 that Calvin Say makes a month, 38% is set aside for housing. 38 cents of a dollar. And then Calvin Say got to pay another 30 cents for my income taxes. Then you add it all up, what kind of discretionary monies I have to buy the goods and gasoline and utilities? That's why it's very, very scary for me, because I've been saying, why don't we try to pause to see where we are at? And the other day, we had the discussion that a lot of projects have been approved by the council, but they have withdrawn their building application because of the financing once more. So that's why, Chair, I'm open to what you folks want to do, but I personally feel if we have that disclosure statement, it forces the seller to share with the buyer. Yeah, there is no natural ventilation. Thank you.
No, thank you. Appreciate that, and appreciate Deputy Director for those thoughts. We can go into discussion before I make my recommendation. I'll just walk through the CD1 as we were discussing. So, apologies, Councilmember Cordero. I didn't see your hand up.
Oh, thank you. This is regarding your CD1, but I'll let you make your discussion first about this CD1.
Okay, mahalo. So I'll just note that as far as the HRS is required, or what the HRS requires, I'll note that subsection, we're on page 3, right, section E. So 1, 2, 3, I think generally deals with just noting that retrofitting and repurposing is specific to units that aren't currently residential. So again, we're talking about generally these commercial buildings that could be used for housing, but were designed in a way to initially comply with the requirements of commercial buildings. And so in terms of using some of those spaces for residential as required by the state legislation, those sections would be taking it as far as some folks argued that that is required. Essentially, in other words, saying that, okay, we have to allow it if it complies with the IBC, the International Building Code. So these additional 4, 5, 6, 7, as Housing Director mentioned, were arrived at from having conversations with stakeholders, both those that are supportive of adaptive reuse and those that had concerns, right? And so when we're looking at 5, it's requiring on-site emergency power. 6 is requiring that there's an evacuation plan as needed, and then 7 requiring that there be notice to tenants, as council members say, was getting at. And so I'm just going to note that those are in addition to what's required under the HRS. And so I know some folks feel like that's kind of a push and a stretch to try to include those, but we did that to try to provide some safeguards, understanding that the state law is going to control January 1st. With that said, my intention was to try to pass out this CD1 and continue to take input, whether it be how we can better specify what exactly qualifies as commercial, as was brought up in testimony earlier, whether there's ambiguity that needs to be fleshed out in terms of what type of backup system or emergency power is required. Those are all things that are on the table, but just wanted to kind of explain that because as I think Councilmember Dos Santos Tam mentioned earlier, the timeline we're running against is January 1st, 2025. Councilmember Cordero.
Thank you, Chair, for explaining your CD1. My question is for clarification on the removal of the the third amendment where it says deleting the requirement for a relocation plan in the event of mechanical and ventilation failure. Would you be able to explain why for that removal again?
So you mean changing it to an evacuation plan?
Yes.
So essentially any alternate setup would be dictated by either the terms of a lease or the terms of a rental agreement or obligations of an HOA. And so, for example, some landlords may have an obligation to provide a hotel room for a tenant. Some, HOAs may have a responsibility in terms in their bylaws that provide for the type of reimbursement that they would be providing tenants, right? If it's an obligation that fell under like the board's authority or something like that, right? So I think the question was, folks were concerned about what is going to be required in terms of providing alternate options. And when we're looking at what the code should say, I think from the public safety standpoint, the main issue was ensuring that there was a plan to provide for safety of all the residents. But then in terms of the civil responsibilities for, whether it's, they need to, get a hotel room down the street, or need to rent them another apartment, or need to provide them a lump sum cash payout would all be dictated by the contractual terms that apply to a particular project situation. Hope that makes sense.
Thank you, Chair.
And I'll turn it over if Councilmember Santos Tam has anything to add to it too.
No, I completely agree. And again, the main point here is we do want to safeguard public health and safety, but I think we need to be careful as to how we go about doing that. And when we use the word relocation, I think that encompasses exactly what you've alluded to, which is this much more robust scheme that may involve things like a hotel room that we can't even envision right now. But I think evacuation is a much clearer, more concise type of thing. And there are some other instances, I think, in the bill where we can be a little bit more specific and careful with our wording.
Appreciate the question. Any other thoughts or discussion before I make my recommendation? No, okay, so Chair is going to recommend that Bill 51, 2024 be amended to the posted CD1 identified as OCS 2024-0899/10/10/2024, 1:30 p.m. submitted by myself. Any additional discussion, objections, or reservations to that amendment? Seeing none, the bill has been amended, and the Chair is going to recommend that Bill 51, 2024 CD1 be reported out for passage on second reading and scheduling of a public hearing. Any discussion, objections, reservations? Hearing none, just to add some discussion point. Again, anyone that wishes to provide additional specificity on amendments, in addition to submitting them in testimony, please also submit them to our office if can, so we can flesh out and have a conversation about any adjustments that can be made. But yeah, hearing no further discussion, objections, or reservations, so ordered. And there being no further business, this meeting is adjourned for today. Mahalo, everybody.